And welcome to, I can't remember the name, Heller Barnes. He's been absent for so long. So Heller Barnes, Ask Us Anything. And today we have a fantastic guest, and I'm going to let Johnny introduce him for us. But Mr. Heller, first he got sick because he came to LA, which would make almost anybody sick. I live here. And he saw me, and I think that was part of the problem. And then they were doing a book together, and we're going to talk about that today. I think you'd be fascinated because we have two individuals at the top of the game and they work together, which is hard to believe with these two egos, how they could be in the same room. And we're going to discuss that today. So, Mr. Heller, can you tell us a little bit about our guest today?
I can indeed. In the past, for many of my workshops, I've written BS bios and things. I've done a few for Paul, but I'll be honest in this. I've known Paul for years. He's literally one of my best friends, which is says a lot about the state of my relationships and his. Um, but Paul he and I work together as coaches. He's been in every one of my workshops almost. He and I have done some coaching together. He's a brilliant performance coach and a fantastic director. And I know this because he directs me in a lot of the work I do. It's a special talent. Some people are really good actors, some people are really good dancers, some people are really good singers. Paul is a great acting coach and a great director. And those two hats, I mean, if he did nothing else, and he literally does nothing else that I'm aware of, but those are enough to enshrine him in the Hall of Fame for acting good guys and people you should listen to. I know that he tends to speak with, very expensive words and multisyllabic crap when, one just stop doing that is enough. But he is a real joy to know as a friend, to have as a mentor, to have as a coach, and to have as a director. And I am absolutely delighted that he was able to make our show today with my dear friend Don Baarns. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm speechless, but only for the moment.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much.
So I noticed you two seem to work together, and I don't understand it at all. Okay, that you do this, but so Mr. Heller, when you hear that this guy is your director for a book, Dramamine, other drugs, what is your first thought when you find out that Paul's working on a book with you?
I stick with the crystal meth pretty much throughout, no matter who I'm working with. Um, it's, I'll tell you what. I've worked with Paul on so many different books, and I enjoy. I not only do I enjoy his company, he's really a dear friend, but he's a wonderful, wonderful director. He finds. Yeah, no, I'm not going to say it's always wonderful because he says things that irritate me sometimes from an actor standpoint. Every time, like I'll be in the middle of something I really think I'm in, and he goes, pull back, give me a little less. I'm like, shut up! It was brilliant. So I'd have to redo it. So he said, but you do what he says because that's why the director's there, and he understands moment to moment, beat to beat. He understands connectivity, and he understands engaging reads, all the things I preach. Matter of fact, Paul and I are absolutely simpatico in our teaching styles. And he's worked with me. Well, not when Penguin Random House, certain publishers have directors all the time. Sometimes they don't. Penguin Random House almost always does. And when they offer me a title or I audition for a title and win it, I ask if Paul can be my director. Not just because I enjoy I always wonder if he's going to have cottage cheese and soup, or maybe just, go out on a limb and have something else, maybe a sandwich for lunch. But he's really very, very good. He keeps me connected always. And he's absolutely hyper aware of when I am not connected. And subtly or not subtly, alerts me to get back in, and we go back. And it's not like if I'm disconnected, you can't suddenly connect. We go back to where the disconnect happened, and he's marked it. He knows it. And we fix it. So the finished product is almost always major percentiles better than had I not had Paul with me.
So Paul,
Paul, what do you?
why do you think that what gives you the right to tell Heller or any other narrator what would be best for this specific scene?
It's interesting. Might be like asking, I guess, an inmate in a prison what gives you the right to keep asking for the same jailer. I mean, if you're going to get what you ask for. You know, I, I'll try to not to be serious too much, but Johnny said something, and I mean the feelings really are mutual, and I mean that to this degree. First of all, I've worked with multiple actors, and from 50,000 feet, I could suggest to you that there are actors that I know that I work with that every single solitary moment are doing their best and they're working their hardest to act, to connect to the story, to engage the listener. And I've worked with the reverse too, the kings and queens of phoning it in, whose outcome seems to be just speaking with a little bit of energy and making it sound as though they're doing something. So the reason I enjoy working with Johnny and a few other narrators, lots of other narrators, really, is is from my perspective, um, I've already got I'm already sitting in front of somebody who is engaged and connected, and think to myself as I'm working, really my primary function as a director, and this is what I really wanted to say because Johnny alluded to it earlier. If somebody said to me, "What's a director? What's your job? Describe your job." I would say my job is to do my best to intuit whether the narrator is 100% emotionally connected, organically connected to the subtext and giving that back, or maybe not, maybe a little less, a little not quite so much. And so my job is to try to assist the narrator, and I really want to underline the word assist, not just tell that narrator in staying fully engaged and fully connected. And sometimes my vocabulary may come out to be, well, just give me a little less. So my reason for saying give me a little less, or just a slightly less voice, particularly in Johnny's case where he knows my vocabulary and a lot of the other narrators who know my vocabulary, is not because I want to particularly hear a low voice. It's because in my mind that just a little bit less in that particular instance um, uh, permits the actor or the narrator to more fully re-engage the subtext, if that makes sense. And it's exciting. I should say that it's exciting for me. I've been doing this for so long, and even now, yes, I was a musician, and it was a wonderful story. I think it was in the first person. Am I right? Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think so. It doesn't matter, but the point is, he, meaning Johnny, won an award for it, did a fabulous job, if that's a measure, which I think it is. And there were times when he was so connected that I found myself sitting there in my little director's chair thinking, yeah. And that for me is what is so special about storytelling.
I'm still looking for the title. It showed up.
I know I can't recall the title.
It's some. Why didn't it show? I can't. I've been going way far back. How could it be this far back? I can't even think of the fella's name.
Well, while you're looking, yeah, I know and he's a very famous whatever. Now, if you ask me why I work with someone like Don, I'd have a completely different response. and that would be because
he's not an actor. That's an easy answer on that one. So here's what I have to. So yeah, first off, I know more than you do about how to perform. I know more about acting than you ever could know. First off, what happens? Like Heller has done 1,000 books, so you would think he would know what to do without me telling him, or you telling him, or anybody else. So I'm always curious: how can somebody like why in the world, as I'm up and coming, why do I need a director? I already know. I mean, and even like Heller, he definitely shouldn't need a director, but he seems to think it helps him be better. But what can a director do for me, and why in the world do I care?
You know
By the
what,
way,
Don?
face the music, Paul.
Yeah, you know what, Don? Yeah, face music. Yes. You know, Don. Even though you didn't mean it, that's actually a great question. And I think the way I would respond to it is two quick ways. You could argue why does a famous athlete or any athlete, a professional athlete, have a coach? I'll say that sort of rhetorically. I won't answer it, but why? Why why does the world's greatest tennis player have a coach? Why does a baseball player who bats 300, which would put him in the Hall of Fame, have a coach?
Right.
So that asks the question, what is it that actually instigates a question like that? And what is it that might make a narrator, some of whom I've worked with, and I won't mention any names, but I've certainly worked with actors and narrators who basically don't want to hear it. My sense is that performance has much to do with a particular kind of comfort level. It's a very scary thing to be in front of a microphone, to be on a stage or in a movie or whatever it is, and to imagine that all of a sudden, 1 minute you had your clothes on and the next minute you don't have them on anymore, unless that's your choice. So that if the actor believes that what the director is all about is to sort of take something away from them, is to sort of in some way criticize what they're already giving, then I can understand where that anxiety comes from. So I think that's the answer to the question. From my perspective, if the actor, and I'll give you an example of someone who arguably could have always said to me, "Hey, I don't want to hear from you." So I find, for example, Scott Brick to be an extremely talented actor, just like Johnny, very talented. Why does he need to hear from me? And yet, I think, like Johnny and like other people I've worked with, I'm thinking of a wonderful actress I just worked with lately. I saw her name here, Eunice Wong, who I've worked with too, super talented, wins all kinds of awards. Why in the world do they want to hear from me? I think the reason is the following: that they intuitively all understand that it is very difficult to simultaneously be in the moment and observe yourself.
Right.
And so that's where an outside voice, as long as the things that you say sort of make sense, it can be useful. All you're doing is essentially, from my perspective, um, uh, as I said earlier, assisting the narrator in staying 100% connected to the text, to the subtext, so that they can do all the hard work.
If I can add as well, Paul is also very gifted in not saying anything when he doesn't need to. Some people who, because they're directing or they're being paid to feel a need to interject, to make a change. Like when someone coaches with Paul and me, you feel like, if someone's perfect, what do I say? I can't say nothing. We have a whole hour to say, what do you do? So you need to say something. Paul, in the moment of the performance, if everything's clicking, if it works, if it's engaging, if it's moment to moment, good stuff, recognizes that and doesn't interfere by saying, not even add an attaboy. The book we just did is by Patrick Kennedy. It's from Penguin Random House. Patrick Kennedy's, Ted Kennedy's son. We did his first book, A Common Struggle, where he talks about mental illness and addiction. In this title, Profiles in Mental Courage, he borrows from his uncle John Kennedy, who did Profiles in Courage, and he tells a story, I think it's 12 stories, of people not always successfully battling depression and mental illness and addiction. And it's quite moving. And I had just come, and I'm still messed up from the death of my dear friend from back home. And Paul knew it, and he recognized it. And there were many chapters when I was tearful, as I seem to be about now. I'm very sentimental, and it really hits. And Paul he coached me Coach me through that, because when you're in an emotional place in the script and or in your life or both, and you are, and there's real tears, and this is sad stories, and you get into these stories, into these people's lives, and the tears are real, and the emotion is really raw. That can create some acting problems, some communication problems, and the actor needs to trust the director to help him or her through that. Because even though I may be emotionally in the right place, if I'm not communicating the emotions in a way that's engaging or even understandable to the listener, we have to fix it.
Well, if I can use a big word,
Yeah, use
chomping at the bit. So I think one of the jobs that a director can imagine as useful for the actor is that, in the back of my mind too, I'm always thinking to myself that the bottom line is that you want the listener to be located in that state of willing suspension of disbelief, right? So and I've had this happen with some other actors too, but and Johnny's an actor, so a lot of it is on wearing it on his sleeve, which is what you want. If he had read a line, I recall one of the lines in one of the vignettes where it was very close to home to him, and his voice shook ever so slightly as he narrated the line. And so we did it, and after it was done, we talked a little bit and thought, maybe that little voice shaking just a little bit like that, in effect, went over the line to the degree that it then no longer is about the book or the story. It's about, hey, Mary, you got to listen to this. Listen to this actor. I think he's losing it. And therefore, that means at that moment, that listener is no longer in that state of willing suspension of disbelief. They're out of it. And so he redid it. It was lovely. It was beautiful. There was no more tremor. And the irony is that even though there was, say, less tremor and arguably less atomic bomb impact on him, it had far more impact, I think, on the listener, because it allows the listener to stay effectively ahead of the story, ahead of the narrator.
And that's something that I would not have recognized or been willing to redo. Sometimes a passage can be so hard if you're emotionally in it. Once you get through it, you think, oh, thank God I don't have to do that. I remember I did Marley and Me. You all know that story. And of course, Marley doesn't finish that book. And so because I'm you have people out there, we're all we've all lost people, dogs and everything. When Marley, that scene, I cried so much and for so long, I'm sure I took 13, 14 takes, because while the emotion is real and obvious to anyone listening, the author's words are garbled in my tears. So while emotionally I'm exactly where I need to be, from an acting standpoint, I'm nowhere near where I need to be, because my job isn't just to feel it. My job is to share the story. And that's where you have to trust your director to get you through those things. And again, Paul, I'm not trying to, bow in obeisance to my liege here, but he's fantastic at that. I recommend you all take a session with Paul. I just think I coach them all. He's marvelous. He's wonderful.
Well, thanks.
Let's talk about Paul. Let's talk a little bit about your beginnings, because they're similar to mine in some ways. I won't go through the whole stories, but tell us how you got involved. We're thinking of young Paul now, so we're going back 200-300 years.
Yes.
The dawn of time. So God said, "Let there be light," and He said, "No, that's too much light."
You're actually close though, because I was in a room, and unbeknownst to me, the person next door was making the first wheel, and I didn't think anything of it. But actually, so my background is as a theater director. That's really, really. I mean, I've performed also, but really, that's where I live. So
Chicago roots, like me.
Yes, my Chicago roots. And I directed out there, and then even in college, my finest experience was directing Waiting for Godot, which really, I think, inspired me and propelled me to want to direct more. So there's a longer story, but the short story is I knew someone with Simon & Schuster. This would be back in the late 80s. And that person said to me, well, I know you're a director. Have you ever directed an audiobook before? And I said, and they said, we are going to work with a well-known actor named Stacy Keach. And I had actually directed a few celebrities before, but I'd never directed an audiobook, which is why. So I walked into they hired me. I walked in, there was Stacy Keach. I'd never seen the inside of a studio before. I saw the engineer and I thought, Jesus Christ, I hope this guy knows what he's doing, because I don't know where I am. And I had a great experience at it. And that's how I got involved, with audiobooks. And so that explains, I think, why I come to audiobook narration as storytelling, acting. I like to say, and I know Johnny agrees, I think to myself, I've always thought to myself, audiobook world, storytelling, narrating audiobooks is 100% acting, 0% voicing, which we can talk about later. I've discovered, just parenthetically along the way, that one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of actors and audiobook narrators engage is a sort of a belief that the voice can act. I'm not sure that it can. I don't think it can. I don't want to go on and on. I'm trying to look at some of these questions
Well,
here.
there aren't many questions. It's mostly people talking about how brilliant Don is, which we get most of the time. It's usually,
well, I've heard,
yeah.
been there, done that.
Do you guys have any questions? Because
I have some
Paul and I
questions.
can talk.
Wait, I have some questions.
Okay, Don,
Forget the audio stuff. So here's the thing, though. Now, so I did the math in my head, and it sounds like you have roughly 35 years working with audiobooks and directing. So that's unbelievable. So we have people in the audience that aren't 35. You've been just doing this. So you've been doing this a long time and seen it all evolve. So a lot of times Johnny has to direct himself. What can he take away from someone like you when he has to do it all by himself for some of those that, where's his headspace and how does he direct himself? Because a lot of people today are starting, they don't get to work with you in the beginning stages. They get to work with you after they've matured. But how do they get to that point? What could they do on their own?
That's actually a great question, Don. You've come up with some really good questions, which I just had no idea was in your wheelhouse. I think self-directing is an enormous challenge, very difficult. If I was to try to think to myself, what is the one thing that someone who is self-directing could think about? It would be, if that person is an actor, to pay attention to your instincts, first and foremost. Most narrators have the feeling that something may or may not be their best. They may not even know why, but they may think, I'm not there. I'm a little disconnected. And once you sort of sensitize yourself to your own performance, you then can step back and say, well, what is it about my performance that feels maybe not as connected or honest or truthful as I can make it.
Okay, but guess what? I already think I'm great. Now let me finish this statement. Okay. Meaning, I don't always know that I don't know. So how am I going to start knowing? Now, I know the answer to this, but I'll let you take it first. What do you think I should do in order to develop that sense? Because I'm starting off from where I think I'm pretty good. I think what I'm doing is connected. I don't even hear that it's disconnected. Yeah. How do I get there?
Well, you're in a way, you're not asking a simple question. I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody really believes that they're fabulous, I'm not sure that there's a way for anybody to say you're not. If you think you are, you are. That said, here's my guess, Don. My guess is that most narrators, even the ones that are arguably win lots of awards, don't think that they bat 1,000 every single time.
Right.
And so from there, you can begin to ask yourself questions like the following. As you're narrating, you can either ask it to yourself, in effect, while you're speaking, but really, if you stop, maybe re-listen to something, you can begin by saying to yourself, how does this story make me, how does this narration, what I just heard, make me feel? How do I feel? Do I believe it? Am I connected to it? Is it moving me or not so much? If the answer is not so much, how do I get there?
So
And
I have a
then,
question for you then to follow up on that. I'm going to suspect, so correct me if I'm wrong. What I really need to do as a musician is I need to have a third party point of view. You were talking earlier about people needing coaching and that kind of thing if they're an elite athlete, and that's absolutely true. Olympic athletes have coaches, and I think in this business, self-evaluation is insanely difficult. And what they need to do is go to you, go to Heller, go to somebody, and get some perspective from somebody who has tremendous amount of experience. And if you come back and say after I read something, well, yeah, that's pretty darn good, then I would then say, oh, I may be able to trust my sense. If I have no outside point of view, I don't think it's appropriate or helpful to trust myself because, yeah, my mom says I have a good voice. My mom says I'm a
no,
great actor.
I think again you're identifying something important. So look, if somebody says, I think I'm pretty good,
Hmm.
let me invest whatever I invest for an hour with Johnny Heller or me or another person that they feel is legitimate. Let me see what they say. If you buy into this person you're investing your time with as credible, and your feedback is, it's great, good, but we could do this and we could do that. You can either take that seriously or you can dismiss it.
Let me add,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, many of you listening live and who will watch this later have been in workshops and you've seen actors work with coaches, or you've worked with coaches. And I think the direct yourself has to happen from the very get-go, the beginning. You can't suddenly in chapter 3 begin to direct yourself. I think there is a tendency for most actors they don't realize it, and no one really thinks about it. But every time I coach with somebody, I spend the first 5 minutes or more chatting a little bit, where they're from, their background, and I'm marginally interested. But really, what I want to do is know what they're like when they just talk to me, because in a minute they're going to do a read, and I promise you they will have a change. Not John Lovitz, I'm an actor, but not far away from it either. Here's a conversation. Hey, Paul, how you doing, man? I grew up in Chicago, chapter 1, and all of a sudden, who is that guy? And I think that's where it starts. I think we have to start from the beginning of our storytelling by eliminating the actor bullshit we bring with us. And I think that may be step 1 in self-direction. Recognize that the way you converse, the way we three are conversing right now, trained though we may be, as soon as we begin the first line of the first chapter, we may add some actor panache. and I think that as soon as the second you start that, you begin wobbling down that performance mountain that you're falling down. Instead of telling a story, you're acting for me. And I think that's the first step in self-awareness and self-direction, self-awareness.
That's a great point. If I can, let me just suggest. Well, I guess I can. I mean, let me just suggest a couple of things that very specific things that a home studio performer who's working by themselves, or say just with an engineer, can ask themselves right from the get-go. Am I voicing or am I acting? Am I connected? Am I committed? If you're an actor, I think that vocabulary will make sense. If anybody needs that to be explained a little bit more, I'm sure happy to do it. But those simple questions, right? Especially, am I voicing or am I acting? My gut is that every person listening to this knows the difference between voicing and acting. I think everybody understands what I'm suggesting by, am I committed? If not, in a sentence, am I committed to the text's emotionality? On a scale of 1 to 10, if the line says, I hate you, she said angrily, and you say, I hate you, she said angrily, I could ask you, and you could ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry do I think I sounded when I said, I hate you? Am I matching the stakes? Do I understand the dramatic stakes? Do I even know what they are? And then I would say, lastly, although this should have come probably in advance of the other things too, do I 100% of the time know the feeling? If I had a nickel for every time I asked a narrator, great, wonderful, sounds good. So let me just ask you, you began this narration, what is the, if it's first person, what is he or she feeling? If it's third person, what's the feeling that the third person storyteller is connected to? And often I'll get an answer that says, well, you know, the character worked for 3 weeks in the in a bagel shop, and you know, it was hard to make the bagels. Oh, okay, but what's the feeling? Well, you know, you're making the bagels, and somebody comes in and looks at a bagel, but how does, so the point is the following. If I said to you, act making a bagel, you can't do it. So the only thing that's actable is the feeling. If you are not aware of the feeling, if you're not connected to the feeling, ipso facto, you're not acting. You can't. You have to be connected. So these are the kinds of things that a home studio storyteller can ask themselves and think about as they evaluate their performance. It's not easy. It can be done.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. As a young man recording music, one of the things I found was I couldn't evaluate on that day how I sounded. Matter of fact, I think it went great. I'd listen to it 3 weeks later and want to become ill. It was really not what I thought it was on that same day. So do you recommend people go back and listen to something that they've done a few weeks ago and reevaluate it and maybe take some notes and then apply it to my next performance? Or how do I do this? I mean,
The short answer is yes, but that's such a good question, Don. And so here, why do you think, I think whether it's music or acting, you get it 1 minute and you don't get it the next, or you don't get it the next day? Why is that? And I would argue that the reason is because acting is not prescriptive. It isn't something that I say to Johnny, okay, I want you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then boom, it's all there. It's very difficult. So what acting is I think is creating within yourself the capacity to be emotionally available and connect to the subtext. How the actor actually does that is really something that would be difficult for me to describe. My job as a director is to make an effort to assist the actor to do that work, but no director can do that work for the actor. And that's why at the end of the day, and I really believe it, I know it sounds like I'm being, too nice, whatever. All the heavy lifting is done by the actor, whether it's Johnny or Eunice or whoever I worked with in the past. They're doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
If I'm good at what I do, if I'm a good coach and a good director, I am making an effort to maintain their connection to the subtext, to keep them committed, and to keep them matching the stakes. That's my job, but they do it. So it's acting is tough because it's a very intuitive experience. It's very difficult.
Tom Barkley here makes a point that I bring up. The one after that, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I had I had to not worry about precision and get to connection. And I think that's a wonderful statement. Yeah, connection to the author's story and to the listener to create an engaging listening experience is what this whole business is about. And I think one of the things when you work with someone like Paul, there'll be times where, from an acting standpoint, we say, well, how does the character, how do you, whatever the question is, however it's phrased, feel in this moment? How does Bill feel about Brian? How does Susan feel about Alfie? Whatever in this moment, and the initial response from every actor at any given moment is, I don't know, which is not acceptable. Well, I think Paul is dead on saying, yeah, what's the name? Anthony Robbins, the learning guru guy. He always says, I've read a lot of his books, and he says things that a shrink says. I don't know if you've ever been to therapy. Everybody should go to therapy. But the answer is, if you say, I don't know, the shrink always says, what would you say if you did know? Because you can't get out of the situation, say, I don't know. Because from the acting standpoint, where you're playing every character in the story, or fiction or nonfiction, I don't know is not acceptable. You always have to know. And I think that's what Tom's referring to in terms of connection. That connection has to exist. And that's why if people write all the time in Facebook, I was in the studio 7 hours today. I don't care. What if you only did one usable hour? What have you done? So I do think that we need to say, A, you need to know, and B, you need to be connected. And if it takes a lot out of you, then cut your hours down a little bit so you can give it. And Paul and I will always say, and Paul, pick up after this and I'll shut up. I believe firmly that once an actor has found the I do know, not that I don't know, has connected, has made that moment, then they've set the bar higher for themselves. And I dislike it and think it's a cop-out if they don't keep that bar that way all the time and go higher than that. Once you've gotten over this issue or issues, then stop pretending there's still issues. Actors are always in their own way, particularly in audiobooks. All the things you say you can't do, you certainly can. All the things you say I don't know, you do know.
I really do subscribe to that. I think that it's, in my experience, if I use the term actors get in their way even more than me, what that means is that actors often cloak themselves and in various vocal techniques that they believe is going to sort of help them sound good. And as I said, from my perspective, the voice can't act, and those vocal techniques are often employed in lieu of acting. And so that to me is what getting in your own way means. And I think actors can train themselves to, in effect, not get in their own way, or to at least aspire to that, so that becomes the aspiration. So not getting in your own way. See, the comment that was made, what was it, Johnny? How do I, whatever it is, instead of connect or not be, what was the word that the person used?
Precision versus connection?
Yeah. I sort of know what precision means, but precision to me would not be an actable term. It's an intellectual word that sounds to me like somebody who's making something, gets a precise measurement. So actors, if an actor exposes themselves to the emotionality of the subtext, then here's what I believe. I believe that once that's done organically, which means not using the voice to help yourself out, but once you are exposed to the stakes, exposed to the emotionality, it, meaning the stakes, will direct you. It will propel you to make choices. It will push you along. Because at the end of the day, the real director in a book is the subtext. That's what's pushing you. If you attempt to direct it, which I think sort of is what precision may mean, you will likely not create an organic, breathing, livable believable performance.
So Nancy asked a question here. So what do I do with some writing that's difficult to connect with for me?
Oh, what a great question. Okay, I think that you've actually asked me now a more simple question. If I said to you the following, every book is a Pulitzer Prize winner, every one, because that's what the author thinks, right? So that's number one. So number two, what is your job as a storyteller? Your job as a storyteller is not to connect to the words. Therefore, the quality of the words, strictly speaking, don't matter. They have no meaning to you. What matters is the feeling beneath the words, because that's what the actor connects to. So yes, I get that there's bad books. And yes, I've sat there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, done a horrible book and thought, oh my God, please make it end. Of course I have. That said, I can't do anything with that as a director. What I can do with a director is say, look, to Johnny, you and I both know this book is a piece of crap. Okay. That said, this character just lost his wife. How does he feel? He feels terrible. Can you act, I feel terrible? Yes, you can. Can you act sad? Can you act angry? Can you act distressed? Yes, you can. So, in the best sense of the word, fuck the words.
Yeah.
They are not the actor's project, only the feeling.
We've all had books, all of us have had books that are grammatically incorrect, no subject, verb, et cetera, and they can throw off the actor, but it must not throw off the listener. Correct it as you go and fix it. And if the writing isn't up to snuff, well, first off, maybe you shouldn't have said yes to the book, but you did, so you're doing it. So whatever the characters in the book, as Paul and I always say, don't know they're characters in a book. They're living their lives. If their emotional understanding in life is only, that of a rock, that's the way it's written. But we know people like that. There's no one and no thing in any book that you're ever going to have to play. No emotional situation, no, there's nothing that you haven't encountered in the deepest, darkest recesses of your mind and heart, or in what's up there. We've all experienced hate. We've all experienced love, different levels. So there's nothing going to be asked of you that you haven't experienced. Whether or not you want to get in touch with those experiences, that's where the acting comes from. So I don't think shitty writing is an excuse for shitty acting.
Totally not. Are there any questions that we can answer, Don?
So there's one, David. Where's Dave?
I'm looking.
He's above Nancy's, so go a little higher. Something about putting a picture up. I can't. What about the old poster picture of who you're talking to? Are you? Let me see if I understand. Are you suggesting that if the scene is between Johnny and Paul, I put a picture of Paul on my screen? Is that what you're? Because I don't think anyone. I've never known anyone to ever do that.
Well, there's also could be talking nonfiction as well, where I have an audience that I'm talking to, and am I talking to actors? Am I talking to somebody else? I mean, I'm trying to envision who I'm talking to as opposed to talking to my monitors here.
Oh, I think whether it's fiction or nonfiction, Paul and I think, are in agreement on this. We haven't discussed this quite as much because this is my big thing. Particularly in fiction, you have to cast the characters from your frame of reference. When if Paul and Don are in my book, those are names I'm given, and I cast Paul as Paul Ruben and Don as Don Baarns. I know who you are. You're not going to be exactly that, but I need to respond to people that I can respond to. Oh, I could cast a Benedict Cumberbatch or Sherlock Holmes, whatever I want, whatever seems to make sense. I don't think I need a photo, as particularly when in a fiction book, there's a whole bunch of people. How many photos do I need? And I'm not sure. In terms of that being an acting technique or crutch or help, I've never, ever, ever, ever heard of it. And I think it'd be more problematic than helpful. Paul, what do you think?
Well, I hear exactly what you're saying. It makes total sense to me. Specifically in terms of nonfiction, I think nonfiction is every bit as much about acting as fiction.
Absolutely.
The differences are obvious. In nonfiction, there's no characters, there's no plot, there's no, multiple storylines. It's a narrative. That said, I think the nonfiction storyteller's outcome is different, but it's simply a performance outcome. Meaning, in nonfiction, you are not in the moment. It is not happening right now. Your objective really is to look, imagine your listener looking at you with their mouth open and thinking to themselves, wow, wow, this is an amazing story. This is amazing. This is why I listened to this. 14 ways to polish my nails. Wow. So how are you as the storyteller going to create that emotional response on the part of the listener? What are you going to do? You're going to educate them. You're going to persuade them. You're going to lean in effectively to them and say, you got to listen to this. You've got to listen to this. You need to take them seriously. You don't want to sound like P.T. Barnum out there. But that's so that the project of the nonfiction storyteller is far more listener centric, if you will, than in fiction.
Are there more questions out there in the audience? Or Don always has good ones, but I want to give you guys a.
Well, that's because we gave them to him. I mean,
well, we always talk about Don and I always talk about our show is called Ask Us Anything, and we rarely rarely listen to what anybody asks. We just chat.
That's it.
Well, I always think, but let's talk about, so now I'm an actor and you've just told me about 17 things that I need to work on.
Yeah.
What
get
order,
going.
What order do I start doing these things in? As far as, and really, okay, it's a journey. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize, the only way to be a great performer is almost always to be a horrible performer. And then
I hear you.
And then to continue to refine over every book. And I always think of it this way, that maybe you listen to yourself, something you did 3 weeks ago, and you go back and you take director's notes for yourself, like, hey, I always rush whenever this emotion comes about. I always overperform this. You'll notice things about what you've done if you'll give yourself some time to have some perspective, and you go to a coach that has some experience and can also give you some different point of views. But you need both of those. And then I want to know how I refine this, because right now I have 400 things that I could do better. What are the top 3 that I should be working on?
Okay, so we can't do it all from 50,000 feet. Number one, in my opinion, number one, what's the feeling?
Okay. What's the feeling at all times?
And I know I don't have the wheel of feel, but some of the people listening may know about that. And if you don't know about it, you should find out about it and maybe get a copy of it. You can find it on the internet. All right. What is the feeling? The reason is the following. If the narrator cannot verbalize the feeling and doesn't know the feeling, they can't act. If you can't act, you can't tell a story. You can read the words and you can even phone it in so it sort of sounds like you're telling something, but it isn't connecting. So what's the feeling? Number one. And in your top 3, I know the feeling. Am I organically connected to it? Meaning organic, meaning am I actually in my body connected to that feeling? That was number 2. Number 3, what are the stakes? 1 to 10. How happy, how sad, how angry, how whatever the feeling is. Am I matching those stakes? So I'll give you 4, 5, and 6, maybe not in this order. Okay. Am I using my voice to act? If I am, I can't do it. I can't. Am I I'm trying to think of what should the sort of top questions be.
Well, hold it. Stop.
One more, and then I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Am I helping the words? Am I pushing?
Can you tell us more about using my voice to act? How do I use my voice to act? And I mean, demonstrate. Then maybe you can even ask Johnny. You can direct him.
Well, I can
to act.
I will. I'll do that. I could give you the quick answer, and then maybe I can direct Johnny. Let's see. Don, I'm so happy to see you, and I'm sincere when I say that.
Oh boy, did you sound sincere.
Did
Wow.
I ever?
Wow.
Didn't I? Isn't that amazing? So obviously,
Yes, the
I
emotion was
think
pouring out of you.
but see, but see, you're actually correct. The problem is, it's if I can just use, it's the fake emotion, meaning it's not organic. It's not grounded in my feeling,
No,
as opposed to without all of that vocal, up and down. If I said to you, Don, I'm really happy to meet you. It's great to see you. I enjoy listening to you. That there's so much more belief that arguably is sincere, as opposed to, Don, it's so great to see you.
yeah, I that
It's kind of like the "Just Do It" slogan.
Yeah.
When we act at or try to be a given thing, in this case sincerity, it's almost always false. And I think a lot of times, also when we're angry, I think a lot of times he said angrily. People rarely yell when they're really super angry. It's quite the opposite. And I think a lot of actors, and let's be honest, a lot of narrators don't come from acting backgrounds. So it affects their toolbox, what they have to choose, what they know. That's why I always recommend, if you want to get into this business, take some acting workshops. You don't have to graduate from Yale, but it just opens you up a little bit. All the different, the Stanislavski and Meisner and Shurtleff and Spolin games and all kinds of things. But the idea is, we forget to play opposites. Acting is choices, plain and simple. It's always making choices. And I think that when you take the obvious choice, go ahead and play it and see how it sounds. But take a second and say, what if I take the opposite choice? Play it this way, then see what you have. And I think you'll find that's what human beings tend to do. I remember, I think I told the story when I was a young man. I didn't do anything wrong, but once in a while I'd get spanked. But my mom always did the spanking. Lovely British woman. And it was, and it was just, she had one of those coat brushes, the wooden coat brush, and she'd give it, but she never hit hard because I'm her baby, for one thing. And so once I said to my father, I said, Daddy, how come when I do something wrong, both times so far, it's you who, you don't hit me, Mom hits me. And he took a beat, and it was almost like talking to Clint Eastwood. He said, I get so angry, if I hit you, I'd kill you. Just like, and I've never forgotten that, because I was like, okay, good, keep it there. Status quo is fine.
Yeah.
But when he said it, I think I had just done something, because he was clearly angry, and he's so angry that he couldn't give the big voice, couldn't give the angry sound. But what he said has stuck with me for 60 years.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that's how people really are. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The
I
acting
do,
choices
yes.
have to come from real human choices, and we forget the human condition because we're so busy performing.
All right, so let's drill down on this. You'll see the word where it says, she said, or she yelled. I love this one. So now people come to me with this tech question. It says she yelled. How do I yell in my microphone where it starts? It's distorting. Do I turn it down? Do I turn away? And I'm always thinking, no. You need to be an actor and actually have the emotion. And in the printed word, it has to say she yelled because you have no clue as to what the emotion is behind the scenes. But yelling into a microphone to get that emotion is the wrong way to do it. Now, I've heard of a stage whisper, and Johnny was just talking about emotion of anger not requiring volume. Is that correct, Johnny? Is that correct?
That is indeed correct. And I know Paul wants to talk about this, so I'll let him do it because he's our guest. But I have some
Well,
thoughts on what you said.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree with that, but just in a quick response, Don, I would say to everybody, understand, and I understand very well, what the technology, at least from a director point of view, is capable of or not. But at the end of the day, you want the technology to support you. You don't want to support the technology as a storyteller. So if you have to yell, you can, if it says he yelled at the top of his lungs, of course, you do not have to yell at the top of your lungs, because the listener intuitively understands that, part of that willing suspension of disbelief is they get it. They know there's a guy in a studio or a woman in a studio, whatever. And, that said, you can still yell. You can go off mic. You can do this. You can do whatever you need to do technically to lower the gain, whatever you got to do to make it sound believable. But the issue with something like yelling is the following. It is not the volume. It is taking your character seriously. And so what that means is that if it said Paul yelled at Don and said, I can't stand your podcast or whatever this is, if it says Paul yelled at Don and said, I can't stand your podcast. Okay. But if I said to the actor, then take him seriously. And then the actor said, and you can forgive I won't win an award, but the actor said, I looked at Don and I said, and he yelled, I can't stand your podcast. We get it. We will hear it. Okay. You can critique my acting, but I think for the example, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Take your character seriously.
It's the same
That's
when
the
they say,
bottom line.
get out of here, Paul chortled.
Yes.
Or Don
How do you
guffawed.
chortle?
You don't chortle or guffaw. You don't have to do what the alleged action verb is, or the adverb is telling you to do, because it doesn't. No one does. No, I've never seen anyone actually chortle. I don't even know what the chortle is, but people use it all the time because in books you want to say he said, she said, he said, she. It becomes boring. So he said chortling. He guffawed.
Well, the only way to do a good chortle is you got to get a chicken bone stuck in your throat.
Yeah.
But I think what you tell me, I think what I hear Johnny suggesting, at least from my perspective, is the following: is that audiobook world is about doing your best in a booth, in a studio, to represent real life. And in real life, as Johnny suggested, unless the book actually says he screamed at the top of his lungs, I would say routinely, I hear actors sound so loud to me. And so what I hear is volume I hear what I call presented volume. And I would much prefer less voice, having it be taken seriously, not presented, and then I'm going to feel it.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little trick to do that, yelling at the top of your voice without doing so, because understand that we have indeed, as Paul mentioned, suspended our disbelief. We're okay with you. Instead of yelling, just go off mic a little bit. You can raise the volume a little bit and hold your vowel sounds, and it will give the illusion of yelling. It's as simple as that.
That's a great point. Yeah. Listeners will buy into these things as long as it feels as though it's taken seriously.
As we run near the end of our hour here, Paul, what do you have coming up? What things you want to? What do you want to plug? Any new films?
Well, no new films. I mean, if I'm compelled to plug, which is fine, I would prefer to plug that I enjoy coaching. I've been doing a decent amount of working with narrators on the first finished hour of a book that they do, where they don't have a director. And at least you'd have to ask the ones that have done this with me. They'll tell you the truth. But from my perspective, it's been very useful. It gets them centered and grounded, because it means if we do the first finished hour that we're doing roughly 9,500 words, which is a pretty decent chunk of book. And so that's something that I enjoy doing. And for anybody listening, if that's something you feel that would be valuable to you, I would look forward to it.
And how do they reach you, Paul?
They reach me basically by going to my website, which I need to update a little bit. But it's, if you go to Tribeca Audio, TRIBECA. I was thinking the two A's. TRIBECAAUDIO.com. But if you Googled Paul Alan Ruben, you'll find Tribeca Audio there. Just go to the website. You'll see my email and phone number, and Don's phone number in there too.
Did I get this right? Can you verify that I spelled that correctly?
Yeah, that's good.
You did.
Okay.
Did
So
you
that-
find it done on somewhere? Did you
No, he just listened
I
to you
just
and wrote
listened,
it.
I
from-
listened to you
yeah.
spell, and I actually,
Yeah.
He believed your
That's
spelling.
yeah.
You were
no,
that
that's correct.
engaging.
You got it right. That
He
is
was
that is
compelled.
correct. Yes. Or email Susie Altons, who I see is listening, and she can tell you.
Yeah.
yeah.
Paul and I will be with Paula, Sean Pratt, Gary Tiedemann, Joanna
Yeah.
Perrin. We're going to be in New Orleans, May 6th through 10th. I don't know if it's room in the hotel or not. So if you want to do that, send me a DM. It's a week in New Orleans, and then all three of us fellas that you see pictured on your screen will be together in the New England Narrator Retreat, which is October 14th to 17th. Registration for that probably will be opening later this month. They're doing some work there at the Warren Center, so I'm hoping they have the same number of rooms as ever, but there may be some stuff to maybe some pre-registration instead of. I'm not sure how we're going to work it out. I'll make sure the people who sign up get to go. That's what I want. So it's always a wonderful thing. And Paul and I will be doing some Paul and Johnny workshops along. I think we're thinking DC and Philadelphia, and of course New York City. All three of us are always available for coaching should you need us.
Yeah. So the other thing, this is a process. So no, sometimes it can be overwhelming when you hear a Paul or a Johnny talk about all the things that we need to do. I've worked with these two, and I know that they're very focused on you taking the next step and being better in your next book than you were in the previous book, knowing that I don't think they got there over the first year of their career. These two have continued to study, and even it cracks me up. They are both some of the best students I've found. When we're at these conferences, they are not only attending, okay, they are not only doing the conference as an instructor and as a coach, but I see them sneaking into the back of other people's sessions and getting their point of view on what's going on in the business today. How are other people coaching? How are other people finding ways to give the same information? And it fascinates me when some of the best people in this business, some of the best people in the world, are still taking their craft seriously enough to watch, learn, and grow their own point of view, their own craft. And these two do it in spades. So I'm proud to hang out with them for this hour. I'm really happy that you were here. And be sure you get a hold of them on the side. If you have not taken a good session with somebody like one of these two, absolutely find a way to get that into your budget for this year and do it. You'll just be blown away at how much you will get from just taking a little bit of time with these great gentlemen. So happy you're here. I do the tech show tonight at 5 o'clock Eastern. There's another tech show called VO Tech Simplified. Be sure to join me there on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Like this. Pass this to others. Make comments. It really, really helps us. And some of you, we now allow you to do super chats, so you can pass us $5 like we're out in the club or something. You can do that if you want to. So we're really happy you're here, and we'll be back next week. And I don't remember who's on the show, but you'll get the notices. Get a hold of me. Any final words there, Johnny?
I think I've summed it up. I love Paul and I love Don, so it's just great. This is a great hour for me. I really enjoyed it.
Great, Paul.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you guys too. And I very quickly, you said something that I thought was, I want to underline, which is, or at least suggest to me, in terms of performance, there's multiple ways to get it. I think, which Johnny often says, we're all going to the same place. We want the same outcome, and there may be this way and that way and this way and that way to get there, but that's where we're all going. And I think that's what it's all about. Good organic performance does not require you to invest 5 years and $5 million. There are not that many moving parts. It's much more in terms of the commitment from here.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys attending.
Yay.
And we'll see you next week. Thank you. And as always, we'll see you on the wires. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, all.